What would I do, or what would you do if I told you you could design your own education? Where would you go? What cities would you visit? Who would you want to meet with? Who would you want to work with and learn from? What risks would you take? What would you want to learn? And maybe most importantly, why? What would you do? All right, I had to ask myself some of these questions a handful of years ago in 2011 whenever I was at this fork in the road. I loved what I was doing. I was working with middle school and high school students in the west suburbs of Chicago, and I had this awesome opportunity to be a part of a community of people that were building a space for students to hang out after school, and kind of a safe space for them to be after school and to work together and learn together. And it was a fantastic opportunity, but I was really interested in kind of how this organization ran and how to make businesses fly, especially businesses that were not only for profit, but for purpose. And so I was at this fork. Do I go get an MBA and spend gobs of money, or do I ask myself this question and see how far that canvas would take me and what I could create? So in 2012, I decided to do something a little bit out of the ordinary. I started a blog and a newsletter that was called the Leap Year Project. And there we go. All right, started a blog and a newsletter called the Leap Year Project, and I had a handful of friends and family, a couple hundred or so, subscribe at $10 a month. And I promised them that I would do 12 projects in 12 months all around the world focused on design, business, and social change. I'd write monthly papers, I would tell the stories, I'd make connections, and so on. And so throughout this whole time, I'd be able to make up my own education and share the journey along the way. Now, this led me to architecture firms. It led me to opportunities to design a new gum flavor for a company called Project 7. So I was in the throes of working with products and thinking about how to bring this new product to market. I spent time in downtown LA in Skid Row serving Thanksgiving dinner. I spent time making films with a nonprofit in Cairo. And then I had the opportunity to not only do my own thing, but I started seeing that people were interested in what I was doing and wanted to talk about this idea of taking risks to learn. And so this turned into less about just Victor designing his own education and more about this community of people that wanted to take risks and use 2012, which was a leap year, as an opportunity to do that. And so they started taking risks and sharing their stories on a website that I created, and it became a community where we were all kind of learning together and had an opportunity to kind of make all of that turn into a final project, a book project called the Leap Year Project. And it became kind of my dissertation to bring all of these stories together into one place. And then finally, I had to get to the place where I wanted to, graduate. How do I make my own graduation? Well, there was a TEDx in Chicago, and so we staged my graduation at TEDx just here in Chicago in 2013. So I got to design my own education. It was spectacular. It was so fun, a lot of work, but I ended up being able to learn a lot of things I wanted to learn. I saved myself a lot of debt. I had job offers at the end of it, a whole slew of skills that I gained from it, and a ton of new friends, a lot of people who are doing the very work that I wanted to do. Now, it led to this question. How might we design an education that started with experience? How might we establish experience as a credible form of education? And it's a question that is probably meant for educators and people who have been in this space for a long time. I felt like it was a little above my head, but we decided maybe we could just start with something simple. Like, could we get a handful of people together and basically start a simple school that was focused on experience? So we called it the Experience Institute, and a handful of people, after putting out a call for applications, decided to join me in Chicago. So 5 students, 2013, fall, and had no idea what we were doing in a lot of ways, right? We didn't have a campus, we didn't have teachers, we didn't have dorms or anything like that, but we knew we wanted to design our own education in a very different kind of way. So what would we do? All right, well, everything was up for grabs. It was a blank canvas all over again. once again, so we had to think about all of the normal things, right? Curriculum, instructors, dorms, degrees, and so on. So for our campus, we just called the city our campus. And we found office spaces where people were willing to let us use their space for a day or 2 days or 3 days. And instead of doing 12 experiences in 12 months, we decided we'd do class every quarter, and in between we'd be able to do whatever we wanted by working with organizations and companies. So instead of 1-month projects, they were 3-month projects, and then meeting back in Chicago for these classes. Now, how about instructors and so on? We were able to team up with industry experts who could give a day or two and teach us about things like community building and storytelling, operations, and so on. And then as far as our classes go, same thing as the Leap Year Project, in the sense that people were able to talk to executive directors and creative directors and CEOs and so on, and decide what role they could possibly fill at a company or an organization, or even just a creative project with a mentor for 2 to 3 months, and then to document it along the way. So April here, one of our students, is working at an architecture firm, or she was at an architecture firm called NBBJ. And then Moof, who was an investment banker and kind of a consultant to banks, he decided he wanted to move his financial expertise to nonprofits. And so he did a sustainable relief project in the Philippines as part of his project. Now, all of this has led us to a whole series of questions around, same kind of questions that I was asking, like how would we even design a group of people's graduation? Now, so afterwards, we were able to think about, first of all, what is it that we were getting out of this year? Now, everyone knows that whenever you go to college, you get a degree. And a degree is really helpful, for getting a job and so on. But when you design your own education, what else comes of that? Maybe not a traditional degree, but what do you get out of it? And so as we were thinking about our graduation and as we were thinking about what comes out of these things, we thought, okay, well, at the end of this kind of year, we have more confidence. It's kind of like when you make something versus when you buy something, right? You're able, if I told you to, or if you and I work together to make a bed, right? You have this new confidence after making the bed that every time you see a bed after that, you're like, I know how to make that. I know where the bolts could go. I know what size wood to use. I know all of these things. Same thing when you design your own education. It gives you a sense of confidence that if I could take something as grand as education, make it my own, I have a whole new kind of, I can throw my shoulders back a little bit whenever I'm embarking upon something that's challenging, difficult, new, out of the ordinary. Agency. Now, agency is like process. Not only I feel like I can do it, but since I've done it before, I even know where to start. And then output. All of these individuals had a portfolio, a body of work, people that they have worked with. And so they were able to show some of their projects. And then finally, impact. They worked with people and on real-world projects that went out into the world. And they were a part of a team of people who were shaping higher education as a whole and trying to kind of create a new format for people to kind of look to. So there was that sense. So then for our graduation, we decided to try something a little bit different. Instead of just giving talks, we designed a space and kind of created a bit of an art gallery of all of our stories and all of our artifacts from the year. They gave short talks, and they did so in a kind of a panel format. And then finally, the next 12 students, this was just like a couple months ago, were also in the space, and the first 5 handed the diplomas to the next 12. So it was this kind of fun experience where they were able to kind of hand the baton off, and the diplomas are incomplete, and throughout the year they kind of get filled in after each experience. Now the question then remains though, with 12 amazing students who are in the middle of this program right now and who are designing their education, they're all over the world working with different companies and organizations. They'll meet back here. They did their September one. They're going to come back in January. How does this go to thousands of people? Like, how do you get, how does this scale? How does this get funded and so on? Well, I think there are 2 kinds of things that you can consider whenever you're trying to get an idea to grow. Well, one is scale, like McDonald's scales. You put a McDonald's with a space and the same menu and so on. But on the other side, you can spread an idea. So how can we help people design their own education? So one of the things we want to do is kind of create a bit of a framework for this, like a process. And so where do we begin? Well, we think first, if you're going to design your own education, instead of declaring a major, declare a mission. And this gives you that opportunity to look inward and see what pains you, what excites you, what makes you hopeful, and what things do you want to put into the world. Start there. Don't worry about a major. Don't worry about what the title is. What do you want to make in this world? Start there. For example, Debbie Patterson is one of our students this year. She had a horrible snowboarding accident in college. She was in hospitals, skull fracture. She was in hospitals for several months, and the whole healthcare system was really clunky. And so afterwards, after she healed up, she started getting really, really interested in how do we make healthcare more delightful? How do we make it more fun? How do you care for people in a more engaging fashion? So she's currently in San Francisco working with Open IDEO to administer the Ebola challenge, to come up with new ways to cure Ebola. So she's working on this kind of experience design in the healthcare unit. Now, okay, what's next? Well, after you know your intention, don't just take a class, take a risk. Think about the thing that is going to move you outside of what you know, not just fulfill a requirement. Now, I like classes, don't get me wrong, but if you move beyond just what you're supposed to do or what you think you need to learn to fulfill a requirement, you're able to stretch yourself and move yourself into new places. For example, one of our students named Dane Johnson, who was a writer, and he had an opportunity to work with an ad agency. Awesome experience opportunity. But he found himself really interested in Eastern Orthodoxy. And as a writer, thought to himself, maybe I could do a series of essays on monasticism because it would sharpen my writing and it would put me in a new environment. And so we put some structure around it. He reached out to a New York Times writer who decided to mentor him and give him some structure for his season of learning at a monastery. Found a monastery that would let him in. And now I'm thinking, you're crazy. You should go to the ad agency. That's resume building, right? I'm the founder of the school, and I'm thinking this, right? This is a problem. But Dane does it, and he has one of the most incredible experiences of his life, and it's one of the most beautiful stories that we tell of the school now. He took a risk, not just a class. All right, so then know your history, and you'll define your future. As you go through this kind of thing, you have to be just a voracious documentarian. You have to take photos and consider how you're growing and moving and changing. In this case, with April Sitarman, our designer, architect, she sketched her way through her year. And as she traveled and so on, you were able to not only watch her sketches grow, but watch her sketches get better. You're able to see via her Instagram profile where she'd been, how she was doing, what she was doing, and how she was doing it. And now this becomes a part of her portfolio when she's talking to design agencies or talking to architecture firms. And then finally, iteration. Make learning a habit. Once you know that intention, once you know what that mission is, find ways to continue putting yourself in places where you can stretch yourself and make beautiful things with awesome people. That way, you're not just doing it once. In this case, with Joe Burgum, one of our youngest students, he was in a position where he really wanted to learn how great teams function. And so he worked with Red Moon, who you'll hear later on today. He worked with Red Moon Theater and watched a nonprofit do an incredible job with these massive, amazing spectacle theater opportunities here in Chicago. Then he worked with an advertising agency on their strategy on their strategy side. And then he worked with an architecture firm, learning how experience design works and how a small team of designers works together in that setting. And by the end, he has a great opportunity to take those learnings home back to his hometown in Fargo. And not only his learnings, but now when he's going back to Fargo and he's thinking about what he wants to do there, he's considering, how do I help Fargo become a more delightful, cold city place to live in? Which, I think all of us are asking that. But he loves Fargo, and if you've ever been there, it's a really special place. So what he's doing now is he's traveling around the world to cold cities and learning how the best cold cities are functioning and what makes them delightful as well. And he'll bring those learnings back. So this idea of learning as a habit, to figure out what stints of time I can spend in new places and gaining those experiences to shape how I'm going to act later. So intention, action, reflection, iteration, a process that we can spread, a template to design our own education in any city for any type of person. Here, I'll end with this. Those who design their education will design their future. Think about it. Those who make things, make things. That's a profound statement. That was free. This is where we're at. We have been in a position where we were walking through a traditional system, set us up to win before. And now that isn't happening as much. Things have changed so drastically. We have an opportunity to take learning back into our own hands. And when we do, I think it makes us adaptable, inventive, and it makes us the kind of people who want to fix things in a world that needs fixing. Thank you.